The silence of Ash Fork, Arizona territory, was broken by the sound of Nora Garrison's wagon wheels, creaking and groaning as they rolled into town on a scorching summer day in 1885. Dust swirled around her as she pulled back on the reins, bringing her two horses to a halt in front of the general store. Unlike other women who might arrive in a new frontier town, Nora wore men's trousers beneath a long riding skirt, her honey blonde hair cut daringly short under her wide-brimmed hat. Practical choices for a woman traveling alone, but choices that immediately set her apart. Nora took a deep breath, surveying the dusty main street of Ash Fork. The railroad had brought the town to life just a few years earlier, and it hummed with the energy of a place still finding its footing. Men in dusty clothes and worn boots gathered outside the saloon, their curious eyes following her as she climbed down from her wagon. She'd felt those stares before, in every town from Illinois to Arizona territory, and had learned to steel herself against them. The general store's bell jingled as Nora stepped inside, grateful for the shade. Behind the counter stood a thin man with spectacles, who looked up from his ledger with mild surprise. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his eyes briefly taking in her unusual attire before returning to her face with professional courtesy. "Something I can help you with?" "I hope so," Nora replied, removing her gloves. "I've just arrived in town, looking to set up a photography business." "Would you happen to know of any buildings for rent?" The storekeeper's eyebrows rose. "A lady photographer?" "Yes," Nora said simply, straightening her shoulders. "I've been practicing the trade for 5 years now." Before the shopkeeper could respond, the door opened again and 3 men entered, spurs jingling with each step. They were ranch hands by the look of them, dust coating their clothes and hats pushed back on their heads. "Well now," the tallest of them drawled, noticing Nora. "What do we have here?" "A lady in breeches." Nora ignored him, turning back to the storekeeper. "As I was saying, you ain't from around these parts, are you?" Another cowboy interrupted, stepping closer. "Women round here know how to dress proper." "I dress for practicality," Nora said evenly, though her heart began to beat faster. She'd faced this kind of treatment before, but it never got easier. "Now, about available buildings," the third cowboy chuckled. "Practicality, she says. Hear that, boys? Next thing she'll be telling us she can shoot and ride like a man, too." "Better than some, I'd wager," Nora replied, unable to help herself. The cowboys laughed loudly, drawing the attention of everyone in the store. The storekeeper looked uncomfortable but said nothing to intervene. "Ain't that something?" the tall one said. "A woman who thinks she can do a man's job. What's next, you gonna run for sheriff?" Nora felt heat rising in her cheeks, but years of dealing with similar mockery had taught her that showing anger only made things worse. She turned back to the storekeeper, determined to conclude her business. "Sir, about the available properties." The bell above the door rang again, and a new figure entered. Taller than the other men, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin, he carried himself with quiet authority. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of finer quality than the ranch hands. The newcomer surveyed the scene with piercing blue eyes, taking in the 3 cowboys crowding around Nora. "Problem here?" he asked, his voice low but clear. The tallest cowboy turned. "No problem, Liam. Just having a friendly chat with the lady here about her unusual fashion choices." The man called Liam Reeves stepped further into the store, his spurs making a soft, jingling sound. "Looks to me like the lady was trying to conduct business before being interrupted." His gaze shifted to Nora, assessing but not unkind. "Madam." "These men were just leaving," Nora said firmly, grateful for the interruption but determined not to appear as though she needed rescuing. Liam's mouth quirked slightly at one corner. "Is that so?" He looked pointedly at the three cowboys. "Mr. Wilkins is busy, and I imagine the lady has things to attend to. Why don't you boys head over to the saloon? First round's on me." The cowboys hesitated, looking between Liam and Nora before the tallest one shrugged. "Sure thing, Liam. We were just having some fun." "Fun's waiting at the saloon," Liam replied evenly. After a moment, the three men filed out, one of them tipping his hat mockingly to Nora as he passed. When the door closed behind them, the storekeeper visibly relaxed. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," he said. "Those boys can get rowdy sometimes." Liam nodded once, then turned his attention back to Nora. "Don't mind them. They're not bad men, just unaccustomed to seeing women who don't fit their narrow view of things." "I'm well aware of how men like that think," Nora replied, her voice cooler than she intended. "And I've handled worse." "I don't doubt it," Liam said, surprising her with a genuine smile that transformed his stern features. "Forgive me if I overstepped. I didn't mean to suggest you needed saving." Nora studied him, noting the intelligence in his eyes and the absence of the mockery she'd seen in the other men. "No offense taken, Mr. Reeves. I appreciate the gesture, even if it wasn't necessary." "Liam Reeves," he said, extending a hand. After a moment's hesitation, Nora shook it. "Nora Garrison. I've just arrived in Ash Fork to set up a photography business." "Is that so?" Liam's interest seemed genuine. "We could use a good photographer around here. Folks are always wanting to send pictures back east to their families." The storekeeper cleared his throat. "About a place to rent. Miss Garrison, there's the old milliner's shop that's been empty since Mrs. Peterson moved to Prescott. It's just down the street, has big windows in front that might suit a photographer. Owner is Samuel Blake, lives in the white house behind the church." "Thank you," Nora said, relieved to finally get the information she needed. "I'll inquire about it right away." "If you'd like," Liam offered, "I can show you where it is. I'm heading that direction anyway." Nora hesitated. While she was grateful for his intervention with the cowboys, she was wary of appearing too dependent on male assistance her first day in town. Yet there was something about Liam Reeves that didn't set off the usual warning bells in her mind. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves, but I can find my own way," she said finally. "I appreciate the offer, though." Liam nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her refusal. "As you wish, Miss Garrison. Welcome to Ash Fork. I hope those boys didn't give you the wrong impression of our town." "I've learned not to judge any place by its loudest residents," Nora replied with a small smile. Liam tipped his hat to her before addressing the storekeeper. "Mr. Wilkins, I'll need those supplies for the ranch. The list is the same as last month." As Liam conducted his business, Nora thanked the storekeeper and left the store, stepping back into the harsh sunlight. She stood for a moment on the boardwalk, orienting herself to find the church the shopkeeper had mentioned. As she did, she noticed the three cowboys outside the saloon across the street, watching her. One said something that made the others laugh. Nora squared her shoulders and headed down the street, determined to find Mr. Blake and secure the shop space. She dealt with men like those cowboys her entire life, especially since she'd taken up photography and begun traveling on her own after her father's death. Their mockery was nothing new, and it wouldn't deter her from establishing herself in Ash Fork. Still, as she walked, she found herself thinking about Liam Reeves and his unexpected defense of her. There had been no condescension in his manner, no expectation of gratitude, just a simple intervention when he saw others being treated poorly. It was a rare quality in a man, in her experience. She put the thought aside as she approached the white house behind the church. She had a business to establish and a new life to begin. Romance had no place in her plans, especially not with a man she'd just met, no matter how unusually decent he might seem. The sun was setting by the time Nora finished negotiating with Samuel Blake for the old milliner's shop. The man had been skeptical of renting to a female photographer, but had eventually agreed when Nora produced references from previous landlords and a stack of her photographs to demonstrate her skill. The rent was reasonable, and the space indeed had excellent natural light from its large front windows. Exhausted but satisfied, Nora drove her wagon to the livery stable at the edge of town, where she arranged boarding for her horses. The liveryman, a grizzled older man named Hank, raised his eyebrows at her attire but made no comment beyond the necessary business discussion. "There's a decent boarding house 2 streets over," he told her as she collected her personal bags from the wagon. "Mrs. Peterson runs it, keeps it clean, and the meals are good." "Thank you," Nora said, appreciating his matter-of-fact manner. "I'll head there now." Mrs. Peterson turned out to be a plump, gray-haired woman with shrewd eyes that took in Nora's unconventional dress without comment. She showed Nora to a small but clean room on the second floor, explaining the house rules and meal times. "Most of my boarders are railroad men, but I keep a separate dining time for the ladies," Mrs. Peterson said. "There's just one other female boarder at present, Miss Winters, the schoolteacher." "I trust you'll find everything satisfactory." "I'm sure I will," Nora replied, setting down her bags. "I've taken a shop in town. I'm a photographer." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that so? Well, that's something new for Ash Fork. You traveling alone, Miss Garrison?" "Yes, I am." Nora kept her tone even, prepared for disapproval. To her surprise, Mrs. Peterson merely nodded. "You must be a woman of considerable fortitude. These aren't easy times for a woman on her own, especially in a territory that's still finding its feet." "I manage," Nora said simply. "I'm sure you do." Mrs. Peterson moved toward the door. "Dinner's at 6. I'll leave you to get settled." Alone in her room, Nora sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of fatigue. The journey to Ash Fork had been long and arduous, and the reception from the Cowboys hadn't been encouraging. Yet she'd secured both lodging and a business location on her first day, no small achievement. Tomorrow, she would begin setting up her studio. She had developed a system over the years, having established temporary studios in several towns as she made her way west. Photography had been her father's passion before his death, and she had learned the art at his side from a young age. When he passed away 3 years ago, leaving her alone in the world, she had sold their home in Illinois and taken to the road with his equipment and her own growing skills. Some towns had been more welcoming than others. In a few places, she'd found a clientele eager for photographic portraits to send to distant relatives. In others, she'd faced the same mockery and dismissal she'd encountered today. Ash Fork, with its position on the railroad line, had potential to be a profitable stop if she could overcome the initial prejudice against her. As she unpacked her personal items, Nora's thoughts drifted to Liam Reeves. There had been something different about him, a quiet confidence that didn't require the belittling of others to maintain itself. She wondered what his position was in the community. From his interaction with the Cowboys and the shopkeeper's deference, he clearly held some authority. After washing up and changing into a more conventional dress for dinner, Nora made her way downstairs to the dining room. Another woman was already seated at the small table, presumably Miss Winters, the schoolteacher. She was perhaps a few years older than Nora's 25 years, with dark hair neatly pinned and an intelligent expression. "You must be the new boarder," she said, smiling as Nora entered. "I'm Clara Winters." "Nora Garrison," Nora replied, taking a seat. "I just arrived today." "Mrs. Peterson mentioned you're a photographer. How fascinating." Clara's enthusiasm seemed genuine. We haven't had one in Ash Fork since Mr. Hendricks moved on to Flagstaff last year. That's good to know, Nora said, encouraged by this information. I've taken the old milliner's shop on Main Street. Oh, that's a perfect location, Clara said, as Mrs. Peterson brought out plates of stew and fresh bread. You'll have to tell me all about your work. I've always been interested in photography. As they ate, Clara proved to be both friendly and informative about the town. She had been teaching in Ash Fork for 2 years and knew most of the residents. The town's growing rapidly because of the railroad, she explained. All sorts come through, some just passing through, others looking to settle. It can be rough at times, but there are plenty of good people here. I met a few of the less welcoming sort today, Nora admitted, describing the encounter at the general store. Clara made a face. That sounds like Earl Watson and his friends from the Double Bar Ranch. They can be troublesome, especially after a few drinks, but they're mostly harmless. Someone intervened, a man named Liam Reeves, Nora said, trying to sound casual. Do you know him, Liam Reeves? Clara's eyebrows rose. Everyone knows Liam. He owns the Rocking R, the largest cattle ranch in the area. He's quite influential in town affairs, though he doesn't make a show of it, he seemed. Different from the others, Nora said carefully. Clara smiled knowingly. Liam's not like most men around here. He was educated back east before returning to run the family ranch after his father died. He's fair-minded, treats his ranch hands well, and generally keeps to himself, unless there's some community matter that needs addressing. She took a sip of water before adding, and he's unmarried, which makes him the subject of considerable interest among the eligible ladies in town, though he doesn't seem to pay much attention to such things. Nora felt herself blush slightly. I wasn't inquiring for that reason. I was merely curious about the town's social dynamics. Of course, Clara said, though her smile suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Well, you'll likely see more of him. He comes into town regularly for supplies and business. As they continued their meal, Clara provided more background on Ash Fork and its residents. By the time dinner concluded, Nora felt she had a better understanding of the community she was joining and a growing conviction that she could make a place for herself there, despite the initial reception. That night, as she prepared for bed in her small room, Nora thought again of Liam Reeves and his quiet intervention at the store. Clara's description had only heightened her curiosity about him. An educated rancher with a sense of fairness was indeed unusual in her experience of frontier towns. Still, Nora reminded herself firmly she hadn't come to Ash Fork to find a husband or even a friend. She was here to build her business and continue the independent life she'd carved out for herself since her father's death. Romance was a complication she neither needed nor wanted. With that thought firmly in mind, she blew out her lamp and settled into bed, listening to the distant sounds of the town as it prepared for night, the last calls from the saloon, the occasional passing of a late traveler on horseback, the whistle of a train in the distance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she needed her rest to face them. The following morning dawned clear and hot, typical for an Arizona summer. Nora dressed in one of her practical divided skirts and a crisp white shirtwaist, preparing for a day of hard work. After a quick breakfast with Clara, who was heading to the schoolhouse, Nora made her way to the livery to retrieve some of her equipment from the wagon. "Morning, Miss Garrison," Hank the liveryman called as she approached. "Your horses settled in fine. Good animals you got there." "Thank you, Hank," Nora replied, pleased by the compliment. Her matched pair of bays had been a significant investment but necessary for her traveling lifestyle. "I need to unload some of my equipment today." "Happy to help if you need it," Hank offered. "Some of them cameras can be mighty heavy, I reckon." Nora smiled, appreciating his matter-of-fact assistance. They certainly can. I would welcome the help with the larger pieces. With Hank's aid, Nora loaded her essential equipment onto a handcart he provided. As they worked, several townspeople passed by, each giving her curious looks. Some nodded politely while others stared openly at her unconventional attire. Nora had grown accustomed to such scrutiny and focused on her task. By mid-morning, she had transported her basic equipment to the shop and begun arranging her new studio. The space was dusty from disuse, but structurally sound, with the excellent natural light she had hoped for. She swept and cleaned, then began setting up her camera stand and backdrops. The bell over the door jingled around noon, and Nora turned to find a well-dressed woman in her 40s standing in the doorway, regarding her with frank curiosity. "Good day," Nora said, setting down the cloth she'd been using to polish her camera. "I'm afraid I'm not open for business quite yet." "So I see," the woman replied, stepping further into the shop. "I'm Margaret Thompson. My husband owns the bank down the street. Mrs. Peterson mentioned we had a lady photographer in town, and I simply had to come see for myself." Nora straightened, recognizing the importance of making a good impression on a banker's wife. "Nora Garrison. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. I'm hoping to be ready for customers within a few days." Margaret Thompson walked around the space, inspecting Nora's equipment with interest. "This is quite impressive, Miss Garrison. Where did you learn your trade?" "From my father," Nora explained. "He was a photographer back in Illinois. I assisted him from the time I was 12 and took over the business after his passing." "And you've traveled all this way on your own, Mrs. Thompson's tone held both surprise and a hint of admiration. "Yes, madam. I've worked in several towns as I made my way west." Mrs. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Ash Fork could certainly use a good photographer. My husband and I have been meaning to have our portrait taken to send to our daughter in Boston. She's expecting our first grandchild in the fall." "I would be honored to create that portrait for you," Nora said sincerely. "Once I'm set up, of course." "Excellent, Mrs. Thompson moved toward the door. "I'll spread the word among the ladies of the church committee. A female photographer might be just the thing to encourage some of the more reluctant women to sit for portraits. Men don't always understand how we wish to be portrayed." Nora smiled, recognizing a potential ally. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate your support." After Mrs. Thompson left, Nora continued working, encouraged by the positive encounter. Around mid-afternoon, as she was arranging her chemicals for developing photographs, the bell jingled again. This time, when she looked up, she found Liam Reeves standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Garrison," he said, nodding politely. "I see you found Mr. Blake and secured the shop." "Mr. Reeves," Nora acknowledged, suddenly aware of the dust on her hands and the loose strands of hair that had escaped her simple bun. "Yes, I did. The location is perfect for my needs." Liam stepped inside, his tall frame making the space seem smaller. He looked around with genuine interest, his gaze lingering on her camera equipment. "That's quite an impressive setup," he commented. "You must be serious about your craft." "I am," Nora confirmed, pleased by his recognition. "Photography is both my passion and my livelihood." Liam nodded, then seemed to remember something. "Actually, I came by for a specific reason. I wanted to apologize again for the behavior of those men yesterday. Earl and his friends can be thoughtless, but they're part of this community, and their actions reflected poorly on all of us." "You have nothing to apologize for, Mr. Reeves," Nora said, touched by his concern but determined to appear professional. "I've encountered similar attitudes before." "That doesn't make it right," Liam said firmly. "A person should be judged by their character and abilities, not by whether they conform to arbitrary expectations." Nora studied him, surprised by this progressive sentiment. "That's a rather uncommon view in my experience, Mr. Reeves." "Perhaps," he conceded with a slight smile. "But then, I've always found that the most interesting people are those who don't quite fit the usual mold." Their eyes met briefly, and Nora felt an unexpected flutter in her chest before she purposefully returned her attention to arranging her equipment. "Was there something else you needed, Mr. Reeves?" she asked, keeping her tone businesslike. "Actually, yes," he said, seeming to recall his purpose. "I came to invite you to dinner at the hotel restaurant this evening, as something of an unofficial welcome to Ash Fork from someone who'd like to see our town make a better second impression." Nora looked up, startled by the invitation. "That's very kind, but it's not charity or courting, Miss Garrison," Liam added quickly, seeming to read her hesitation. "Consider it a business dinner. I've been wanting to commission photographs of the rocking R for some time, the land, the buildings, the livestock. Documentation for insurance purposes primarily, but also as a record of what we've built there. If your skills extend to landscape and architectural photography, I'd be interested in discussing terms." Nora blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected business proposition. Such a commission could provide much-needed income while she established her portrait business in town. "I do have considerable experience with landscape and architectural photography," she said cautiously. "My father specialized in it before turning to portraits for practical reasons." "Excellent," Liam said, seeming genuinely pleased. "Then perhaps you'll join me for dinner at 7. The hotel restaurant serves the best food in town, and we can discuss the particulars of what I have in mind." Nora hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Very well, Mr. Reeves. A business dinner at 7. I'll look forward to it," Liam said, replacing his hat. "Good day, Miss Garrison." After he left, Nora found herself staring at the door, conflicted emotions swirling within her. On one hand, a commission from a prominent rancher would significantly boost her fledgling business in town. On the other hand, she couldn't help wondering if Liam Reeves had other motivations for seeking her out. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. She'd made it clear this was a business arrangement, and he had respectfully framed it as such. There was no reason to read anything more into his invitation. Returning to her work with renewed determination, Nora pushed thoughts of Liam Reeves aside. Yet as she arranged her studio throughout the afternoon, she found her mind repeatedly returning to their conversation and the dinner engagement that awaited her that evening. At precisely 7 o'clock, Nora arrived at the Ash Fork Hotel, a 2-story building that represented the town's growing prosperity. She had changed into one of her few conventional dresses, a deep blue ensemble that complemented her fair coloring. Her honey blonde hair was neatly arranged, and she carried herself with the confident poise that had become her armor in unfamiliar situations. The hotel's restaurant was modestly elegant, with white tablecloths and decent silverware. Clearly, the establishment aimed to impress the railroad executives and other business travelers who passed through. Several diners looked up as she entered, their curious gazes following her as she scanned the room. Liam rose from a corner table, raising a hand to catch her attention. He was dressed in a well-cut dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair neatly combed. As Nora approached, she noted the approving glances from other diners and the speculative looks from several women. "Miss Garrison," Liam said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for joining me. You look lovely this evening." "Thank you," Nora replied, taking her seat with composed dignity. "This is certainly the finest establishment I've seen in Ash Fork." "It serves well enough," Liam said with a small smile, "though I suspect it doesn't compare to restaurants in larger cities." "I wouldn't know," Nora admitted, My travels have generally kept me in smaller towns and settlements. Chicago is the largest city I've spent time in, and that was years ago. The waiter approached, and Liam ordered for both of them after consulting Nora on her preferences. Once they were alone again, he leaned back slightly in his chair, regarding her with those perceptive blue eyes. "So, Miss Garrison, tell me about your journey to Ash Fork. What brings a skilled photographer all the way to the Arizona territory?" Nora considered her answer carefully. "Opportunity, primarily. The frontier is still being documented, and people here are often eager for photographs both of themselves to send back east and of the landscape they're claiming as their own. There's less competition here than in established cities. And more freedom, perhaps," Liam suggested. "Less rigid social expectations," Nora smiled slightly. "There are expectations everywhere, Mr. Reeves, as yesterday demonstrated. But yes, the territories do offer certain flexibilities not found in more settled areas." "A diplomatic answer," Liam acknowledged. "But I suspect there's more to your story than professional opportunity." The waiter returned with their meal, providing Nora a moment to gather her thoughts. Once they were alone again, she decided a degree of honesty might be the best approach. "My father died 3 years ago," she said, meeting Liam's gaze directly. "We had a small photography studio in Illinois. After his death, there was pressure for me to either sell the business to a male competitor or marry someone who could properly manage it for me." Her tone made clear what she thought of that idea. "Instead, I sold our property, purchased a wagon and good horses, and took our equipment on the road. I've been moving westward ever since, staying in towns long enough to build a clientele before moving on when the work dwindles or local attitudes become problematic." "That takes considerable courage," Liam said, his expression thoughtful, "and skill to maintain such independence." "It's simply what needed to be done," Nora replied, uncomfortable with his admiration. "Now, you mentioned photographs of your ranch. What exactly did you have in mind?" Liam accepted her change of subject gracefully. "The Rocking R covers nearly 10,000 acres, he explained. "It was my father's land. Originally, he came out here in the early days of the territory, when the Apache still controlled much of the region. He built it from nothing into one of the largest operations in northern Arizona. And now it's yours," Nora observed. "Yes, since his passing 5 years ago," Liam confirmed. "We run about 3,000 head of cattle, employ 20 ranch hands year-round and more during roundups. The main house and buildings are about 15 miles outside town. And you want photographs of all this?" "As comprehensive a documentation as possible," Liam said, warming to his subject. "The main house and outbuildings, the corrals and barns, the landscape itself. Perhaps some of the hands at work, though I understand that action photography has its limitations." "It does," Nora agreed, "though I've had some success with it. The real challenge would be the time involved. Such a project could take weeks, depending on the detail you desire." "I understand," Liam said, "and I'm prepared to pay accordingly." "Would $3 per day plus expenses be agreeable? You could stay in the guest room at the main house for the duration of the project." Nora nearly choked on her water. $3 a day was a generous wage, far more than she typically earned from portrait work. "That's quite substantial," she managed to say. "I believe in paying fairly for skilled work," Liam said simply. "And this is important to me, not just for practical reasons, but as a record of what my father built and what I've continued." Nora considered the offer. The money was excellent, and such a project would be professionally satisfying. Yet the prospect of staying at the ranch, isolated with Liam and his workers, gave her pause. "I appreciate the offer of accommodation," she said carefully, "but I would prefer to return to town each evening. The daily travel would be factored into my working hours, of course." Liam studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. I understand your concern about propriety. Perhaps a compromise I could arrange for Mrs. Hernandez, our housekeeper, to accompany you on days when you need to work in more remote areas of the property. That would provide both practical assistance and appropriate chaperoning." Relieved by his understanding, Nora nodded. "That would be acceptable." "When would you want this project to begin?" "At your convenience, once you've established your studio," Liam said. "I understand you'll need time to settle in Ash Fork and develop your portrait business." As they continued discussing the details of the commission over dinner, Nora found herself increasingly comfortable in Liam's company. He asked intelligent questions about her work, listened attentively to her answers, and demonstrated a genuine respect for her expertise that she rarely encountered in men. By the time they finished their meal, they had outlined a preliminary agreement for the photography project and moved on to more general conversation. Liam proved to be well informed about national affairs and possessed a dry wit that occasionally surprised a laugh from Nora. "You mentioned being educated back east," she said as they lingered over coffee. "Where did you study?" "Harvard," Liam replied, a hint of self-consciousness in his tone. "My father insisted, though I was eager to return to the ranch." He believed in the value of education, even for a future cattleman. "That's admirable," Nora said. "My father had similar views. He taught me photography when most men would have considered it inappropriate for a daughter." "Your father sounds like an unusual man." "He was," Nora agreed, a familiar pang of loss touching her heart. "He believed women were capable of far more than society typically allows. My mother died when I was very young, and he raised me on his own, teaching me everything he knew." "He would be proud of what you've accomplished," Liam said softly. Their eyes met across the table, and Nora felt an unexpected connection forming between them, a recognition of shared values despite their different backgrounds. The moment was broken when a boisterous group entered the restaurant, including the same cowboys who had mocked Nora at the general store. Earl Watson spotted them immediately and nudged his companions, their laughter carrying across the room. "Well, look at that, boys," he called loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The lady photographer's already set her cap for the richest man in the county. Didn't waste any time, did she?" Nora stiffened, mortification washing over her as heads turned in their direction. Liam's expression darkened and he started to rise from his chair. "Ignore them," Nora said quickly, keeping her voice low. "Please, making a scene will only reinforce their assumptions." Liam hesitated, then slowly sat back down. "You're right," he acknowledged, though his jaw remained tight. "But I won't have them insulting you." "I've endured worse," Nora said with forced lightness, "and I'm quite capable of fighting my own battles when necessary." "I don't doubt it," Liam replied, his expression softening as he looked at her. "But no one should have to face such rudeness alone." The waiter approached their table, looking uncomfortable. "Dessert, Mr. Reeves, Miss Garrison?" "No, thank you," Nora said quickly. "I should be going, it's getting late, of course." Liam signaled for the bill. "I'll walk you back to your boarding house." Despite her embarrassment at the cowboy's comments, Nora didn't protest his offer. The streets of Ash Fork could be unsafe after dark, particularly for a woman alone. As they left the restaurant, Earl and his friends made more comments, just loud enough to be heard but not quite offensive enough to justify confrontation. Liam placed a protective hand at the small of Nora's back, guiding her past them without acknowledging their presence. Outside, the night air was cool after the heat of the day, and the stars shone brilliantly in the clear desert sky. They walked in silence for a moment, Nora acutely aware of the occasional passers-by who noticed them together. "I apologize for what happened in there," Liam said finally. "Earl Watson has always been a troublemaker." "It's not your fault," Nora replied, her composure returning now that they were away from the restaurant. "And it's not unexpected. A woman in my position becomes accustomed to such assumptions." "That doesn't make them acceptable," Liam said firmly. They reached the boarding house too quickly, in Nora's estimation. Despite the unpleasant end to their dinner, she had enjoyed Liam's company far more than she cared to admit. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Reeves," she said formally as they stopped at the front gate. "And for the commission. I look forward to beginning the project once my studio is established." "Liam, please," he said quietly, "at least when we're not in formal company." Nora hesitated, then nodded. "Liam," she conceded, "and you may call me Nora in similar circumstances." "Nora," he repeated, as if testing the sound of her name. In the moonlight, his features were softer, his eyes reflecting the stars above. "I enjoyed our dinner, despite the interruption. Perhaps we could do it again sometime, without the pretext of business." The invitation hung between them, unmistakable in its meaning. Nora felt her heart quicken, both thrilled and alarmed by her own reaction to this man she barely knew. "I think," she began, then paused to gather her thoughts. "I think I would like that, but I need to establish myself here first. My work must take precedence." Liam smiled, seemingly pleased by her honest answer rather than discouraged. "I understand completely. The offer remains open whenever you feel the time is right." He took her hand gently and raised it to his lips, the gesture both old-fashioned and startlingly intimate. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Liam," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the night sky, before turning to enter the boarding house. Inside, she leaned against the closed door for a moment, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling within her. This was not what she had planned when coming to Ash Fork. She had not sought connection, let alone the beginnings of attraction to a man she barely knew. Yet there was something about Liam Reeves that seemed to bypass her carefully constructed defenses. With a sigh, Nora climbed the stairs to her room. Tomorrow would bring another day of work setting up her studio, and she needed to focus on that, not on the lingering warmth of Liam's hand on hers or the way his eyes had looked in the moonlight. Business first, she reminded herself firmly. Everything else would have to wait. Over the next 2 weeks, Nora threw herself into establishing her photography studio with single-minded determination. She cleaned and organized the space, set up her equipment, and created a small darkroom in the back of the shop. She painted the name Garrison Photography in elegant gold lettering on the front window, along with the hours of operation. The work was physically demanding but satisfying. As the studio took shape, Nora began to feel a sense of permanence she hadn't experienced since leaving Illinois. Ash Fork might not be her final destination, but for the first time, she found herself contemplating staying in one place for more than a few months. Word of her presence spread quickly through the small town. Mrs. Thompson proved true to her word, bringing several ladies from her church committee to meet the lady photographer and discuss future portrait sessions. Clara Winters sent her young pupils to deliver handwritten notes to their parents, announcing the new business. Even Hank, the liveryman, mentioned her services to his customers. By the end of the second week, Nora had booked several portrait appointments and completed her first session photographing the Thompson family, with Mr. Thompson somewhat stiffly posed beside his more enthusiastic wife. Throughout this time, Liam Reeves kept a respectful distance. He came into town twice, each time stopping by the studio to inquire about her progress, but he never stayed long and made no further mention of dining together. Nora told herself she was relieved by his restraint, even as she found herself looking forward to his brief visits. On a Friday morning 3 weeks after her arrival in Ash Fork, Nora opened her studio door to find an unexpected visitor waiting on the boardwalk, a Mexican woman in her 50s, dressed simply but neatly, her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Miss Garrison?" the woman asked in accented English. "I am Elena Hernandez, housekeeper at the Rocking R. Senor Reeves sent me to ask if you are ready to begin the photography work at the ranch." "Mrs. Hernandez," Nora greeted her, extending a hand. "Please come in." "Yes, I believe I'm sufficiently established now to begin Mr. Reeves's commission." Elena followed her into the studio, looking around with open curiosity. "It is very nice," she said approvingly. "Very clean." "Thank you," Nora replied, amused by the housekeeper's priorities. "When would Mr. Reeves like me to start at the ranch?" he said. "Whenever is convenient for you," Elena answered. "But the weather is very good now. Soon it will be too hot, and then the summer storms will come." "A valid consideration," Nora acknowledged. "I could begin on Monday if that suits." Monday is good. Senor Reeves asked me to tell you that he will send a buggy for you, as your equipment is too heavy for horseback. I will come with the driver to accompany you." Nora nodded, appreciating Liam's thoughtfulness in both the transportation and the chaperone. "That's very considerate. What time shall I expect you?" 7 in the morning, if that is not too early. The light is best in the morning and evening. "No, you're absolutely right," Nora said, impressed by the woman's understanding. 7 would be perfect. After working out a few more details, Elena left, promising to return with the buggy on Monday morning. Nora returned to her work with renewed energy, looking forward to the creative challenge of documenting the Rocking R. Landscape and architectural photography had been her first love in the medium, though portrait work was more reliable for income. The weekend passed quickly, filled with portrait sessions and developing photographs in her small darkroom. By Sunday evening, Nora had prepared the equipment she would need for the ranch project, carefully packing her view camera, tripod, glass plates, and chemicals. On Monday morning, she was ready and waiting when the buggy arrived at precisely 7 o'clock. Elena Hernandez sat beside the driver, a young Mexican man introduced as Miguel, Elena's nephew. Between them, they loaded Nora's equipment into the buggy and set off for the Rocking R. The journey took just over an hour, following a well-maintained road that wound through increasingly beautiful country. As they crested a small rise, Nora caught her first sight of the ranch, a sprawling complex of buildings nestled in a verdant valley, with mountains rising dramatically in the background. "It's breathtaking," she murmured, already mentally composing photographs. "Senor Reeves's father chose this land well," Elena said proudly. "There is water year-round from the creek, good grass for the cattle, and protection from the worst storms." The main house was larger and more impressive than Nora had expected, a 2-story structure built of local stone and timber, with a broad porch wrapping around 3 sides. Several outbuildings, barns, and corrals surrounded it in a well-organized arrangement. Men on horseback could be seen in the distance, working with cattle. As the buggy pulled up to the main house, Liam emerged from a nearby barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was dressed for ranch work in a simple shirt, vest, and worn jeans, looking more at ease than Nora had seen him in town. "Welcome to the Rocking R," he called, approaching the buggy with a warm smile. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." "Not at all," Nora replied, accepting his help down from the buggy. "The road is excellently maintained." One of the first things my father taught me: a ranch is only as good as its access to town, Liam said. He turned to Alina and Miguel. Thank you for escorting Miss Garrison. Miguel, if you could take her equipment to the porch for now. As Miguel began unloading the buggy, Alina addressed Liam in rapid Spanish. He replied in the same language, surprising Nora with his fluency. Alina nodded, seemingly satisfied, and headed toward the main house. Alina says breakfast is waiting whenever you're ready, Liam explained to Nora. But I thought you might like a quick tour first, to get oriented and perhaps decide where you'd like to begin your work. That would be perfect, Nora agreed, already assessing the morning light and how it fell across the buildings. For the next hour, Liam showed her around the ranch complex, explaining the function of each building and the overall operation. He was clearly proud of the rocking R, but spoke about it with a pragmatism that Nora found refreshing. This was not a vanity project for him, but a working enterprise that supported dozens of families and contributed significantly to the region's economy. The ranch has been in your family for how long? Nora asked as they walked. My father established it in 1858, Liam replied. He came west after the Mexican-American War with little more than ambition and a talent for hard work. He started with just 100 acres and a few dozen cattle. By the time he died, it had grown to what you see today. And your mother, Nora ventured, noting there had been no mention of her. A shadow crossed Liam's face briefly. She was a Boston society woman who came west for adventure and married my father in a whirlwind romance. She died when I was 8, tuberculosis. After that, my father sent me east to live with her family and attend school. I returned summers to learn the ranch business. I'm sorry about your mother, Nora said softly. Liam nodded his acknowledgement. It was hard on both my father and me. In some ways, I think he threw himself into building the ranch as a way of coping with her loss. By the time I finished at Harvard and came home for good, he'd made the rocking R into one of the most successful operations in the territory. And now you're continuing his legacy, Nora observed. With some changes, Liam said, a hint of wry humor entering his voice. My father was a good man, but he had some old-fashioned ideas about how things should be done. I've tried to modernize where it makes sense: better treatment of the hands, more sustainable grazing practices, that sort of thing. They had completed a circle of the main complex and returned to the house, where Alina waited on the porch. Breakfast is getting cold, she scolded gently. Come eat before you continue your tour. The kitchen was large and welcoming, with a massive wooden table that could easily seat a dozen people. Alina served them a substantial breakfast of eggs, bacon, fresh bread, and coffee. The food was excellent, and Nora found herself eating more heartily than she usually did at the boarding house. After breakfast, I thought we might ride out to the South Ridge, Liam suggested as they ate. There's a view from there that captures most of the ranch lands. It might give you a good starting point for planning your photographs. That sounds ideal, Nora agreed. Though I should warn you, while I can ride, I'm not particularly accomplished at it. We'll take it slowly, Liam assured her. And Alina packed a lunch for us, so there's no rush. After breakfast, they returned outside, where Miguel had saddled 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding for Nora, and a magnificent black stallion for Liam. This is Diablo, Liam said, patting the black horse's neck. Don't let the name fool you, he's well behaved, just spirited. And this is Bonnie, he added, indicating the bay. She's gentle but sure-footed. I thought she might suit you. Nora approached Bonnie, letting the mare sniff her hand before stroking her neck. She's beautiful, she said, genuinely impressed by the quality of the horse. You're very thoughtful, Mr. Reeves. Liam, she corrected herself, remembering their agreement. I try to pay attention to details, he replied with a small smile. It's a necessary quality in both ranching and business. With Alina watching approvingly from the porch, Liam helped Nora mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. She adjusted her divided riding skirt, grateful once again for the practical garment that allowed her to ride astride rather than side saddle. "Lead the way," she said, gathering the reins confidently. They rode at a leisurely pace, Liam pointing out features of the landscape and explaining the operation of the ranch. Nora found herself fascinated both by the information and by the man himself. In this environment, Liam seemed even more at ease than he had in town. This was clearly where he belonged, on the land his father had built into a legacy. The South Ridge proved to be about 2 miles from the main house, a gentle elevation that provided a spectacular view of the entire valley. Liam dismounted first, then helped Nora down from Bonnie. They secured the horses to a nearby tree before approaching the ridge's edge. "Oh," Nora breathed, taking in the panorama. Below them stretched the rocking R, the buildings of the main complex now miniature in the distance, with herds of cattle visible as dark specks against the green landscape. Mountains rose in the background, their peaks still holding traces of winter snow despite the summer heat. "This is my favorite spot on the entire ranch," Liam said quietly, standing beside her. "My father brought me here when I was just a boy, lifted me onto his shoulders and said, 'Remember this, son. This is what we're building not just for ourselves but for the future.'" The emotion in his voice touched something in Nora. She turned to look at him, seeing not just the successful rancher but the boy who had lost his mother, been sent away from his home, and returned to carry on his father's dream. "It's magnificent," she said sincerely. "And I understand now why you want it documented. This is something worth preserving, not just in reality but in images that can be shared and remembered." Liam met her eyes, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared values despite their different paths in life. "I knew you would understand," he said simply. They spent several hours on the ridge, Nora making notes and sketches for future photographs, identifying the best angles and times of day for various shots. Liam proved to be a knowledgeable and patient guide, answering her questions about the ranch operations and the landscape. Around noon, they spread the lunch Alina had packed: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apple tarts on a blanket in the shade of a large juniper tree. As they ate, their conversation turned more personal. "You've told me about your father," Liam said, "but what about the rest of your family? Do you have siblings?" Nora shook her head. "No, it was just my father and me after my mother died. She passed when I was 6, an influenza outbreak that swept through our town. My father never remarried, though I think he could have. He devoted himself to raising me and to his photography business. That couldn't have been easy in those times," Liam observed. "A man raising a daughter alone." "It wasn't," Nora agreed. "There were plenty of well-meaning neighbors who thought he should send me to live with relatives or find a new wife quickly. But he was stubborn, said he'd promised my mother he'd raise me himself, and that's what he intended to do. He sounds like a remarkable man." "He was," Nora said softly, memories of her father bringing both warmth and sadness. "He taught me everything, not just photography, but how to think for myself, how to be independent. He used to say that just because something was traditional didn't make it right, and just because something was new didn't make it wrong." "Wise words," Liam commented. "My father had similar views, though he expressed them differently. He believed in progress, in building something better than what came before." They fell into a companionable silence, looking out over the valley below. The day had grown warm, but a gentle breeze made the temperature pleasant, especially in the shade. "May I ask you something personal?" Liam said after a while. Nora turned to him, a touch of wariness entering her expression. "You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer." Liam smiled at her caution. "Fair enough. I was wondering why you've chosen to keep moving from town to town. You clearly have the skills to establish a permanent business somewhere. Why the nomadic life?" The question touched on considerations Nora had been pondering herself since arriving in Ash Fork. She took a moment before answering. "At first, it was necessity," she admitted. "After my father died, staying in our hometown became difficult. Too many people with too many opinions about what a young woman on her own should do. Moving on seemed the simplest solution." She paused, considering how much to reveal. "And then it became a habit, I suppose." Each new town offered a fresh start without the weight of expectations or assumptions. "But it must be lonely," Liam observed, his tone gentle rather than judgmental. Nora looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. "Sometimes," she acknowledged, "but there's a certain freedom in it too. I answer to no one but myself." "And is that enough?" Liam asked quietly. The question hung between them, more weighted than it might have seemed on the surface. Nora found herself unwilling to examine it too closely, especially with Liam watching her with those perceptive blue eyes. "It has been," she said finally, gathering the remains of their lunch to signal an end to the conversation. "We should head back if I'm to take any photographs today. The light will be ideal for the main house in about an hour." Liam accepted her deflection without pressing further, helping her pack up their picnic things and return to the horses. As they rode back to the ranch complex, Nora found her thoughts in unexpected turmoil. Liam's question had touched on doubts she usually kept firmly suppressed. Was her independent, nomadic life truly fulfilling? Or was it merely a shield against potential rejection and hurt? She pushed the thoughts aside as they reached the main house. There was work to be done, photographs to take. Personal considerations would have to wait. For the remainder of that first day, Nora focused entirely on her craft, setting up her camera to capture the main house in the afternoon light. Liam left her to her work, understanding that she needed to concentrate, though he remained nearby, attending to ranch business while occasionally checking if she needed anything. By the time the sun began to set, Nora had exposed several plates and felt satisfied with her initial work. Alina brought her fresh lemonade as she packed up her equipment. "You will return tomorrow?" the housekeeper asked. "Yes, if that's convenient," Nora replied. "There's much more to document." "Good," Alina said approvingly. "Senor Reeves, he seems. Content today, it is good to see." Before Nora could respond to this observation, Liam approached from the barn. "All finished for today?" he asked. "Yes, I've made a good start," Nora said, professional pride evident in her voice. "The house photographs should turn out well. The light was perfect." "I'm glad to hear it," Liam said sincerely. "Same time tomorrow. There's the north pasture. I'd like to show you some of the best grazing land in the county." "Tomorrow would be fine," Nora agreed, surprised by how much she was looking forward to it. As Miguel helped load her equipment back into the buggy for the return journey to town, Nora found herself reflecting on the day. It had been professionally satisfying but also, personally, unsettling. Liam Reeves was becoming more than just a client, and the realization both thrilled and alarmed her. Alina accompanied her back to town, chatting comfortably about life at the ranch and subtly providing background on Liam that filled in some of Nora's understanding of the man. By the time they reached Ash Fork, twilight was falling, casting the town in soft golden light. "Thank you for your company today, Mrs. Hernandez," Nora said as Miguel helped unload her equipment at the studio. "I enjoyed getting to know you." "And I you, Miss Garrison," Alina replied with a warm smile. It is good that Senor Reeves has found someone who understands what he is trying to do with the ranch records. He is a good man, the best I know. He deserves happiness." There was a gentle suggestion in her words that Nora chose not to acknowledge directly. "He's fortunate to have such loyal employees," she said instead. Alina's knowing smile indicated she wasn't fooled by Nora's evasion, but she simply nodded and instructed Miguel to help carry the equipment inside before they departed. Alone in her studio as darkness fell, Nora began the process of developing the day's plates, losing herself in the familiar chemical procedures that would transform her exposures into visible images. As the photographs gradually appeared in the developing bath, she felt a surge of satisfaction. They were good, capturing both the physical reality of the rocking R and something of its spirit as well. One image in particular stood out, a view of the main house with the mountains behind it, the afternoon light creating a golden glow that seemed to embody the pride and care Liam had described. Looking at it, Nora could almost hear his voice speaking of his father's legacy and his own responsibility to it. It was well past midnight when she finally finished developing and fixing the day's photographs. Exhausted but pleased with her work, Nora locked up the studio and made her way to the boarding house, her mind still filled with images of the rocking R and of its owner. The pattern established on that first day continued through the following weeks. 6 days a week, Alina and Miguel would arrive at 7 in the morning to transport Nora and her equipment to the ranch. Each day, Liam would show her different aspects of the rocking R, from the remote pastures where the cattle grazed to the corrals where the horses were trained, from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived to the old line cabin where his father had first settled the land. The photography project expanded naturally beyond its original scope. What had begun as simple documentation became something more comprehensive, a visual record not just of the physical ranch, but of the life and work that animated it. Nora photographed the ranch hands at their tasks, the cattle drives, the blacksmith shoeing horses, Alina in her kitchen garden, and even Liam himself, caught unaware as he worked alongside his men. Throughout these weeks, Nora found herself increasingly drawn to Liam. His intelligence, humor, and quiet strength appealed to her in ways she hadn't experienced before. He respected her work without condescension, valued her opinions, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences. Unlike other men she'd known, he didn't view her independence as a challenge to overcome or a flaw to correct, but as an intrinsic part of who she was. For his part, Liam made no secret of his growing feelings for Nora, though he respected her professional focus and never pushed beyond the boundaries she established. Their conversations during long rides across the ranch lands gradually deepened, touching on books they'd read, places they'd seen, and their hopes for the future. By the 4th week of the project, Nora had accumulated a substantial portfolio of images documenting the rocking R. She had also, against her better judgment, developed feelings for Liam that went far beyond professional appreciation or simple friendship. On a Friday afternoon, as they rode back to the main house after photographing a distant section of the ranch, Liam brought his horse alongside hers. "The project is nearly complete, isn't it?" he asked, a note of regret evident in his voice. Nora nodded, feeling a similar reluctance to see their time together end. "Yes, I believe I've documented everything you requested and quite a bit more besides. I should be able to assemble the complete portfolio within another week." "You've done remarkable work," Liam said sincerely, "far beyond what I initially envisioned." "Thank you," Nora replied, warming at his praise. "It's been a fascinating project, one of the most satisfying of my career." They rode in silence for a few moments before Liam spoke again. "There's a social at the town hall tomorrow evening, a dance to raise funds for the school. I was wondering if you might consider attending with me." The invitation, while not entirely unexpected, still caught Nora off guard. Their relationship had remained ostensibly professional despite the growing connection between them. A public appearance together at a town social would signal something more. "As friends?" she asked cautiously. Liam reined his horse to a stop, prompting Nora to do the same. He turned in his saddle to face her directly, his expression serious. "No, Nora, not as friends." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I think we both know there's more between us than that. I'm asking to court you properly, if you're willing." Nora's heart raced at his directness. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, while another part, the cautious, independent self she'd cultivated for years, hesitated. "Liam, she began, then paused to gather her thoughts. "These past weeks have been special to me. You've been special to me, but my life isn't settled. I've never stayed in one place long enough to allow yourself to form attachments," Liam suggested gently when she trailed off. Nora nodded, appreciating his perception. "Yes, and I'm not sure I know how." "Perhaps it's time to find out," Liam said, his voice warm. "I'm not asking for promises, Nora. Just an opportunity to see what might develop between us, beyond the confines of work." Put that way, it seemed like a reasonable request, a natural progression of the connection they'd been building. Yet Nora knew it represented a significant departure from the careful independence she'd maintained since her father's death. "What about the town gossips?" she asked, voicing one practical concern. "Earl Watson and his friends have already made assumptions about us." "Let them talk," Liam said dismissively. "Anyone whose opinion I value will judge us by our actions, not by gossip. Besides," he added with a hint of humor, "I've lived in this territory long enough to earn the right to escort whomever I please to a town social without explanation." Despite her reservations, Nora found herself smiling at his confidence. "You make it sound so simple." "It can be," Liam replied, "if we don't overcomplicate it." Looking at him in the golden afternoon light, Nora felt something shift within her, a willingness to take a risk she would have avoided just weeks earlier. This man, with his quiet strength and unexpected sensitivity, had somehow breached the walls she'd built around her heart. "Very well," she said finally. "I would be pleased to attend the social with you tomorrow evening." Liam's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face, transforming his usually composed features with genuine joy. "I'll call for you at 7 then." As they continued their ride back to the main house, Nora felt both excitement and trepidation about what she had just agreed to. For the first time in years, she was allowing herself to contemplate a connection that might lead to permanence, a frightening prospect for someone who had used mobility as protection against vulnerability. Yet as she glanced at Liam riding beside her, she couldn't deny the rightness she felt in his company. Whether it led to heartbreak or happiness remained to be seen, but Nora recognized that some journeys were worth undertaking despite the risks. Back in town that evening, Nora faced a practical challenge she hadn't anticipated. She owned nothing suitable for a town social. Her wardrobe consisted primarily of practical clothing for work, with only a few respectable but plain dresses for Sundays and business meetings. Nothing that would be appropriate for a dance. At breakfast the next morning, she confessed her dilemma to Clara Winters, who responded with unexpected enthusiasm. "Oh, this is perfect," Clara exclaimed. "I have just the thing, a blue silk dress that my sister sent me from St. Louis. It's a bit too small for me, but it should fit you beautifully, and I've been looking for an excuse to have it worn." "Clara, I couldn't possibly," Nora began. "Nonsense," Clara interrupted firmly. It's sitting in my trunk doing no good to anyone. Besides, she added with a knowing smile, half the town has been speculating about you and Liam Reeves. Might as well give them something worth talking about. Despite her embarrassment at being the subject of town gossip, Nora found herself grateful for Clara's generosity. After breakfast, they went to Clara's room, where the schoolteacher produced a lovely dress of cornflower blue silk with modest lace trim far more fashionable than anything Nora had worn in years. "It's beautiful," Nora admitted, running her fingers over the fine fabric. "Try it on," Clara urged. "We may need to make a few adjustments." The dress fit remarkably well, needing only minor alterations to the hem and waist, which Clara performed with quick, expert stitches. When Nora looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The blue silk complemented her fair coloring, and the cut of the dress emphasized her slender figure in a way her practical work clothes never did. "You look stunning," Clara said, standing back to admire her handiwork. "Liam Reeves won't know what hit him." Nora blushed, but couldn't deny a certain pleasure in the transformation. It had been a long time since she'd allowed herself to embrace her femininity so completely. "What about my hair?" she asked, touching her short honey blonde locks self-consciously. "Leave that to me," Clara said confidently. "I have a few ideas." By the time 7 o'clock approached, Nora had been thoroughly prepared for the social. Clara had arranged her short hair in a surprisingly feminine style, with soft waves framing her face and a small decorative comb, adding a touch of elegance. A borrowed pair of earrings and gloves completed the ensemble. "Remember," Clara advised as they heard a knock at the front door, "you deserve this evening of enjoyment. Don't let anyone's small-mindedness diminish it." Nora squeezed her friend's hand gratefully. "Thank you, Clara, for everything." When she descended the stairs to the boarding house parlor, Nora had the satisfaction of seeing genuine surprise and admiration in Liam's expression. He stood waiting in an impeccably tailored dark suit, his hat in his hands, looking every inch the successful rancher, but it was the warmth in his eyes as they took in her appearance that made Nora's heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," Nora replied, feeling uncharacteristically shy. "Clara was kind enough to lend me the dress." "I must remember to thank Miss Winters," Liam said, offering his arm, "though I suspect you would look just as lovely in your usual attire." The genuine compliment brought a flush to Nora's cheeks as she placed her hand on his arm. Mrs. Peterson, watching from the parlor doorway, gave them an approving nod as they departed. The town hall was only a short walk away, already lit up and bustling with activity as they approached. Music spilled from the open doors, a small band of local musicians playing a lively tune. Couples and families streamed inside, the women in their best dresses and the men in suits or clean work clothes. Nora felt a moment of anxiety as they reached the entrance. "Everyone is looking at us," she murmured to Liam. "They're looking at you," he corrected gently, "because you're the most beautiful woman here tonight." His confidence steadied her, and Nora lifted her chin as they stepped inside. The hall had been transformed with paper decorations and lanterns, the wooden floor cleared for dancing. Tables along one wall held refreshments, while benches lined the other walls for those not dancing. As they entered, the music momentarily faltered as heads turned in their direction. Nora recognized the Thompson family, several of her portrait clients, and with an inward grimace Earl Watson and his friends near the refreshment table. "Miss Garrison, Mr. Reeves." Mrs. Thompson bustled over to greet them, her genuine warmth cutting through the moment of awkward silence. "How wonderful to see you both. Miss Garrison, that color is absolutely perfect on you." Her friendly welcome seemed to break the spell, and conversations resumed around them. Liam guided Nora further into the hall, greeting acquaintances with easy courtesy while keeping her close by his side. "Would you care for some punch?" he asked as they completed a circuit of the room. "Yes, thank you," Nora replied, grateful for a moment to compose herself. As Liam went to fetch their drinks, Clara appeared at Nora's side, looking lovely in a green dress. "You're causing quite a stir," she said with a mischievous smile. "Mrs. Abernathy nearly swallowed her dentures when you walked in with Liam Reeves." Despite her nervousness, Nora laughed. "Is it really so shocking?" "Ash Fork hasn't had much excitement since the Perkins boy fell into the water trough during last year's 4th of July celebration," Clara replied. "Besides, Liam is considered the town's most eligible bachelor. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him without success." Before Nora could respond, Liam returned with 2 cups of punch. He greeted Clara warmly and thanked her for the loan of the dress, his easy manner putting both women at ease. The band struck up a waltz, and Liam turned to Nora. "May I have this dance?" Nora hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I should warn you, it's been some time since I've danced." "I'll lead," Liam promised, taking her hand. He guided her onto the dance floor with confidence, one hand resting lightly at her waist while the other held hers. As they began to move to the music, Nora was pleasantly surprised to find that Liam was an excellent dancer, leading her with subtle guidance that made it easy to follow his steps. "Where did you learn to dance so well?" she asked as they circled the floor. "Harvard," Liam replied with a hint of humor. "My Boston relatives insisted I learn all the social graces, despite my protests that I'd never need them in Arizona territory." "And yet here we are," Nora observed, smiling up at him. "Here we are indeed," Liam agreed, his eyes warm as they met hers. "I'm finding those lessons more valuable than I ever expected." As they continued to dance, Nora gradually relaxed, enjoying the sensation of being led by capable hands through the familiar patterns of the waltz. She became less conscious of the curious gazes following them, and more aware of the simple pleasure of moving in harmony with Liam. When the waltz ended, they were approached by Mr. Thompson, who engaged Liam in conversation about recent territorial politics. Nora took the opportunity to catch her breath, accepting a glass of water from Clara, who had been watching from the sidelines. "You two look good together," Clara commented. "I haven't seen Liam so animated at a social event in all the time I've been in Ash Fork." Before Nora could formulate a response, she became aware of a commotion near the refreshment table. Earl Watson's voice rose above the general conversation, loud enough to carry across the room. "Don't see what a man like Reeves wants with a woman who dresses like a man and does a man's job," he was saying to his companions, clearly intending to be overheard. "Must be desperate if he's courting the lady photographer. Or maybe she's just easy prey, being new in town and all." Nora felt her face flame with anger and embarrassment. Clara touched her arm supportively, but before either woman could speak, Liam was striding across the room toward Earl, his expression thunderous. The crowd parted before him, conversations dying as people sensed the confrontation brewing. Liam stopped directly in front of Earl, his voice low but carrying in the sudden silence. "I believe you owe Miss Garrison an apology, Watson." Earl, emboldened by alcohol and the presence of his friends, sneered. "Don't see why. Just stating what everyone's thinking. A proper woman doesn't gallivant around the countryside alone, taking pictures and wearing men's clothes." "Miss Garrison is a respected professional who has shown more courage and determination than most men I know," Liam replied, his controlled anger more intimidating than a shouted response would have been. "She deserves your respect, not your crude insinuations." "Didn't take you for a man who'd be led around by a pretty face," Earl retorted, looking past Liam to where Nora stood. "Especially one that comes with a woman who doesn't know her proper place." Liam's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment Nora feared he would strike Earl. Instead, he spoke with deadly quietness. "My patience is at an end, Watson. You will apologize to Miss Garrison now, or you will answer to me outside." The threat hung in the air, made all the more serious by Liam's reputation as a fair but formidable man. Earl glanced at his friends. Finding no support there, they had backed away slightly, unwilling to be drawn into a confrontation with Liam Reeves. Nora stepped forward, unwilling to let the situation escalate further. "Mr. Reeves," she said clearly, "I appreciate your defense, but Mr. Watson's opinion is of no consequence to me. I would prefer to continue enjoying the evening rather than allow his rudeness to disrupt the social." Her calm dignity in the face of insult made Earl look all the more boorish by comparison. Several of the townspeople nodded approvingly at her response. Liam turned to her, his anger softening slightly. "As you wish, Nora, but the choice of whether to apologize still stands for Mr. Watson." Earl looked between them, recognizing that he was rapidly losing whatever audience he had thought to impress. With poor grace, he muttered, "No offense meant, Miss Garrison." It was hardly the apology Liam had demanded, but Nora nodded acceptance, wanting only to end the uncomfortable scene. "None taken, Mr. Watson." Mrs. Thompson, ever the social mediator, clapped her hands to attract attention. "I believe the band was about to play a Virginia reel." "Everyone take your places." The crowd began to disperse, grateful for the diversion. Liam remained tense for a moment longer, his eyes still on Earl, before Nora gently touched his arm. "Dance with me," she asked softly. The invitation seemed to break through his anger. Liam's expression softened as he looked down at her. "Are you sure you want to stay? We could leave if you prefer." "And give Mr. Watson the satisfaction of thinking he ruined our evening." "Absolutely not," Nora replied with determination. "Besides, I've always enjoyed the Virginia reel." A slow smile spread across Liam's face. "You continue to surprise me, Nora Garrison." "Good," she said lightly. "I'd hate to become predictable." As they took their places for the dance, Nora was aware of curious and speculative glances from the townspeople, but they seemed more approving than censorious. Liam's public defense of her had made a statement that few could misinterpret. He considered her worthy of respect and held her in high esteem. The Virginia reel was followed by more dances, and as the evening progressed, Nora found herself genuinely enjoying the social. Liam was an attentive partner, making sure she had refreshments when needed and introducing her to various townspeople she hadn't yet met through her business. Several of the ranch owners' wives made a point of engaging her in conversation, asking about her photography and expressing interest in having family portraits taken. Even Mr. Thompson, the banker, discussed the possibility of commissioning photographs of the new bank building once construction was completed. By the time the social began to wind down around 11, Nora realized she had potentially gained several new clients and, more surprisingly, a degree of acceptance from the town's established families. Liam's open support had undoubtedly influenced their reception of her, but she sensed that her own dignity and composure during the confrontation with Earl had also made an impression. As they walked back to the boarding house through the quiet streets of Ash Fork, Liam offered Nora his arm. The night was pleasantly cool after the warmth of the crowded hall, stars glittering overhead in the clear desert sky. "I must apologize for Watson's behavior," Liam said after they had walked in companionable silence for a while. "I should have anticipated trouble and headed it off before it reached that point." "You have nothing to apologize for," Nora assured him, And neither do I, despite what Mr. Watson seems to think. Liam stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. No, you don't, he said seriously. Nora, I want you to know that I admire your independence and your courage. They're not qualities I find challenging or inappropriate, they're part of what draws me to you. The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. For so long, Nora had been defending her choices and her lifestyle against criticism or condescension. To have them explicitly valued instead was a novel and powerful experience. Thank you, she said softly. That means more to me than I can express. Liam reached out to take her hand, his touch gentle but sure. Despite Watson's rudeness, I hope you enjoyed the evening. I did, Nora replied truthfully. Very much so, thank you for inviting me. They stood for a moment in the moonlight, hands joined, the connection between them strengthening in the quiet intimacy of the moment. Liam's gaze dropped to her lips, and Nora felt her breath catch in anticipation. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw if she wished, Liam leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender rather than demanding, yet Nora felt it down to her toes. She responded with a matching gentleness, her free hand coming to rest lightly on his chest. When they parted, Liam's smile held a warmth that made Nora's heart skip. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he admitted. I'm glad you waited until now, Nora replied softly. It made it more special. They continued their walk to the boarding house, hands entwined, both feeling the shift in their relationship. At the front gate, Liam paused. When will you return to the ranch to continue the photography project? He asked. Monday morning, Nora replied. As usual. Would you consider having Sunday dinner with me tomorrow? Liam asked. Not at the ranch, there's a spot by the creek that's perfect for a picnic. I could pick you up after church. The invitation represented another step away from their purely professional relationship, but Nora found she welcomed it. I'd like that very much, she said. Liam raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Until tomorrow, then. Good night, Nora. Good night, Liam, she replied, reluctantly withdrawing her hand and making her way up the path to the boarding house door. Inside, she found Mrs. Peterson waiting up in the parlor, ostensibly reading but clearly monitoring the comings and goings of her boarders. Did you enjoy the social, Miss Garrison? The older woman asked, setting aside her book. Very much, thank you, Nora replied, unable to keep a note of happiness from her voice. Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. Mr. Reeves is a fine man. His father was one of the first settlers I knew when I came to this territory as a young bride. The Reeves men have always been honorable to the core. Yes, I believe he is, Nora agreed, touched by the older woman's implicit endorsement. As she prepared for bed that night, Nora found her thoughts filled with memories of the evening, the dancing, Liam's defense of her, the conversations with townspeople who seemed to be accepting her presence, and most of all, that gentle kiss in the moonlight. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included staying in one place, forming lasting connections, perhaps even building a life with someone else. It was a frightening prospect in many ways, after so long on her own. Yet as she drifted towards sleep, Nora found that the fear was overshadowed by a growing sense of possibility and hope. Sunday dawned clear and warm, a perfect day for the picnic Liam had proposed. Nora attended the morning church service, where she noticed a distinct change in the way the townspeople greeted her. There were more smiles, more direct acknowledgments, even a few invitations to join various church activities. Whether this was due to Liam's public championship of her, or simply the community's gradual acceptance, Nora wasn't certain, but she welcomed the change. After the service, Liam met her outside the church, having exchanged his Sunday best for more casual attire suitable for a picnic. He had a buggy waiting, a wicker basket already loaded in the back. Elena insisted on preparing our lunch, he explained as he helped Nora into the vehicle. She seems to have appointed herself guardian of our friendship. The slight hesitation before the word friendship made Nora smile. I suspect Elena has strong opinions on many subjects. You have no idea, Liam agreed with a chuckle, taking his place beside her and picking up the reins. She practically raised me after my mother died, and she's never quite accepted that I'm a grown man capable of managing my own affairs. They drove out of town, following the same road that led to the Rocking R but turning off onto a smaller track after a few miles. The path wound through stands of cottonwood trees until they reached a secluded spot by a small creek, where the water burbled pleasantly over rocks and created a natural pool in the shade of the trees. "This is beautiful," Nora said as Liam helped her down from the buggy. "I had no idea this was here." "It's part of the Rocking R, technically," Liam explained, retrieving the picnic basket and a blanket from the buggy. "But it's far enough from the main operations that it remains peaceful. My father used to bring me fishing here when I was a boy." He spread the blanket in a shady spot near the water and offered Nora his hand to help her settle comfortably. The gesture was unnecessary but courteous, and Nora found she appreciated these small attentions that demonstrated Liam's consideration without implying weakness on her part. The picnic Elena had prepared was substantial and delicious: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and even a bottle of wine carefully packed to keep cool. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily, touching on books they had read, places they had seen, and their thoughts on various subjects. "Tell me about your travels," Liam requested as they finished their meal and sat contentedly in the dappled shade. "Where have you been since leaving Illinois?" Nora leaned back, supported on her elbows as she looked up at the patterns of sunlight filtering through the leaves above. "I started eastward, actually spent some time in Ohio and Pennsylvania before turning west, then Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico Territory, and finally Arizona. I've stayed anywhere from a few weeks to several months in each place, depending on the work available and the reception." "Any favorites among those places?" Liam asked, genuinely interested. "Colorado was beautiful," Nora recalled. "The mountains there are spectacular, completely different from the landscapes here, but equally majestic in their own way. And I enjoyed parts of New Mexico Territory. Santa Fe has a fascinating blend of cultures. Would you want to return to any of those places?" The question seemed casual, but Nora sensed an underlying purpose to it. She considered honestly before answering. "I don't think so. Each served its purpose in my journey, but I've never felt drawn to return to any of them. They were stopping points, not destinations." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "And Ash Fork, is it just another stopping point?" The directness of the question caught Nora off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Liam had demonstrated repeatedly that he preferred honesty to polite evasion. "I don't know," she admitted, meeting his gaze. "When I arrived, I assumed it would be, but now." "Now?" Liam prompted gently when she trailed off. Nora took a deep breath. "Now I find myself considering possibilities I haven't allowed myself to contemplate in a very long time." It wasn't quite a declaration, but it was more than she had intended to reveal. Liam seemed to understand both what she had said and what remained unspoken, for he reached over to take her hand, his thumb tracing gentle patterns across her knuckles. "I'm glad to hear that," he said simply, "because I find myself hoping very much that Ash Fork might become more than a stopping point for you." The admission hung between them, charged with meaning and possibility. Nora felt a familiar fear trying to assert itself, the instinct to withdraw, to protect herself from vulnerability and potential hurt. But alongside it was a newer, stronger feeling, a desire to embrace the connection forming between them, to see where it might lead. "Liam," she began, uncertain how to express the conflicting emotions within her. "You don't need to say anything now," he assured her, seeming to read her struggle. "I understand that I wasn't part of your plans when you came to Ash Fork. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. Just openness to possibilities." His understanding gave Nora the breathing room she needed. "I can offer that," she said softly. "Openness to possibilities." Liam's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. "That's all I ask for now." The rest of the afternoon passed in pleasant conversation and companionable silences. They walked along the creek, Liam pointing out places where he had fished as a boy or seen particular wildlife. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they reluctantly packed up their picnic things and prepared to return to town. Just before they left, standing beside the buggy in the golden late afternoon light, Liam took both of Nora's hands in his. "Thank you for today," he said, his blue eyes warm as they held hers, "for your company and for your honesty." "Thank you for understanding," Nora replied, meaning it deeply. "Few would." Liam leaned down and kissed her gently, a brief but tender touch that conveyed affection without demanding more than she was ready to give. As they drove back toward Ash Fork, Nora found herself leaning slightly against Liam's side, accepting the comfort of his solid presence beside her. The following weeks brought a gradual but steady deepening of their relationship. Nora continued her work on the ranch photography project, but now there were shared meals, occasional rides that had nothing to do with documenting the property, and quieter moments of connection. In town, they were seen together at church services and community events, their growing attachment becoming common knowledge. To Nora's surprise, the townspeople's reception of her improved significantly as her relationship with Liam became apparent. Whether this was due to his respected position in the community or simply the natural process of acceptance over time, she couldn't be certain, but she found herself increasingly welcomed into the social fabric of Ash Fork. Her photography business thrived as well. The portraits she had taken of the Thompson family circulated among the town's prominent citizens, leading to numerous commissions. The railroad station master hired her to document the expansion of the station, and several ranchers, following Liam's example, commissioned photographs of their properties. By mid-August, nearly 3 months after her arrival in Ash Fork, Nora found herself in the surprising position of having more work than she could easily manage, and a social circle that included not only Clara Winters and the Thompsons but several other families as well. For the first time since her father's death, she felt herself putting down roots in a community. Her relationship with Liam continued to develop at a measured pace that respected her need for independence while acknowledging their growing feelings for each other. They had not spoken explicitly of a future together, but the possibility hovered in their conversations and in the plans they made. On a warm Saturday evening in late August, Liam invited Nora to dinner at the ranch, not a working visit, but a formal dinner to celebrate the completion of the photography project. Elena had prepared a special meal, and the dining room of the main house was set with the best china and silver, candles providing a warm, intimate light. "This is quite an occasion," Nora observed as Liam held her chair for her. "I feel underdressed." "You look perfect," Liam assured her, taking his own seat at the head of the table. "And it is indeed a special occasion. The photography project is complete, but more importantly, it marks 3 months since you arrived in Ash Fork." "Has it been that long already?" Nora marveled. It seems both longer and shorter somehow. Time has a way of behaving strangely when life is changing, Liam observed. Elena served the meal with dignified ceremony, each course more delicious than the last. As they enjoyed the food and conversation, Nora found herself looking around the dining room, noting details of the house she hadn't fully appreciated during her working visits: the craftsmanship of the furniture, the quality of the fixtures, the subtle touches that made the house both impressive and comfortable. "Your father built a remarkable home," she commented. "He did," Liam agreed, following her gaze around the room. "Though it was never quite the same after my mother died. I think that's why he sent me east. The house felt empty to him without her, and seeing me only reminded him of what was missing." "Do you resent that he sent you away?" Nora asked gently. Liam considered the question before answering. "I did at first. I was a child who had lost his mother and then, in a way, his father too. But as I grew older, I came to understand his grief better. And the education I received in the East has served me well, even here." He smiled slightly. "Though I doubt my professors at Harvard ever imagined I would apply their economic theories to cattle ranching in Arizona Territory." After dinner, they moved to the parlor, where a small fire took the edge off the evening coolness that was beginning to replace the summer heat. Elena brought coffee before tactfully withdrawing, leaving them alone. Liam seemed somewhat nervous. Nora noticed unusual for a man who typically projected such quiet confidence. He paced slightly before sitting beside her on the sofa, turning to face her with an expression of determination. "Nora," he began, "there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Her heart quickened at his tone, anticipation and anxiety mingling. "Yes. These past 3 months have been the happiest of my life," Liam said simply. "Getting to know you, watching you build your business and your place in the community, seeing your courage and determination every day, it's been a privilege." "Liam," Nora said softly, touched by his words. He took her hands in his expression serious but warm. "I know you came to Ash Fork expecting it to be temporary, another stopping point in your journey. And I know that forming permanent attachments wasn't part of your plan. But plans change, sometimes for the better." Nora nodded, unable to deny this truth. Her plans had indeed changed since meeting Liam, her vision of the future expanding to include possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. "I love you, Nora," Liam said, the simple declaration filling the room with its significance. "I love your independence and your spirit, your talent and your determination. I love the way you see the world through your camera and the person you are when you're not behind it. And I would be honored if you would consider making Ash Fork your permanent home as my wife." Though she had sensed the conversation was moving in this direction, the actual proposal still took Nora's breath away. For a moment, she sat in silence, her hands in Liam's, feeling the weight of the decision before her. "This isn't a request for you to give up your independence or your work," Liam continued, seeming to read her thoughts. "I would never ask that of you. Your photography is part of who you are, and I respect that completely. I'm asking if you would share your life with me as equals." The words "as equals" resonated deeply with Nora. Throughout her adult life, she had encountered men who viewed women as subordinate, as possessions rather than partners. Liam had consistently demonstrated a different perspective, one that valued her autonomy and respected her abilities. "I love you too," she said softly, the admission both frightening and freeing. "These months with you have shown me that independence doesn't have to mean isolation, that sharing my life with someone doesn't have to mean surrendering my identity." Liam's eyes lit with hope at her words. Then Nora took a deep breath, making the conscious choice to embrace the future opening before her rather than clinging to the safety of her solitary past. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Yes, I will marry you, Liam." Joy transformed his features as he gathered her into his arms, holding her close with a tenderness that made her heart swell. When he kissed her, it was a kiss that promised partnership, respect, and enduring love, everything Nora had never thought to find but now couldn't imagine living without. They were married in October, when the desert heat had subsided, and the landscape was touched with the subtle colors of fall. The ceremony took place in the Ash Fork Church, filled to capacity with townspeople who had come to accept and even embrace the unconventional lady photographer who had captured their most eligible bachelor's heart. Clara Winters stood as Nora's maid of honor, while Liam's foreman, a steady, reliable man named Thomas who had worked at the Rocking R since Liam's father's time, served as best man. Mrs. Thompson had helped organize the reception at the town hall, and even Alina had unbent enough to contribute her famous pastries to the celebration. Nora wore a gown of ivory silk that Clara had helped her select during a special trip to Prescott, her honey blonde hair arranged simply with a few wildflowers. Liam, handsome in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle on Mr. Thompson's arm, the banker having graciously offered to stand in for her late father. Their vows were traditional but spoken with personal conviction, each word a promise they intended to keep. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the applause from the congregation reflected genuine goodwill rather than mere social convention. The reception that followed was joyous and surprisingly harmonious. Even Earl Watson and his friends, who had been noticeably subdued since Liam's public defense of Nora at the social, offered awkward but seemingly sincere congratulations. Mrs. Peterson wept openly, declaring it the finest wedding Ash Fork had seen in a generation. As they danced together for the first time as husband and wife, Liam held Nora close, his expression one of quiet contentment. "Happy, Mrs. Reeves?" he asked softly. "Very," Nora replied, the new name strange but welcome on her ears. "Though I intend to keep Garrison for my professional work, if you don't mind." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Liam assured her. "Your reputation as a photographer is your own achievement." The practical arrangements of their marriage reflected this respect for Nora's professional identity. While she moved to the Rocking R to live with Liam, they agreed that she would maintain her studio in town, traveling in 3 days a week to handle portrait commissions and other business. The remaining days she would work from the ranch, documenting life in the Arizona Territory for a book they had discussed collaborating on her photographs, paired with his knowledge of the region's history and development. Their first year of marriage brought challenges as well as joy, as they both adjusted to sharing their lives after long periods of independence. There were occasional disagreements, moments of frustration or miscommunication, but these were outweighed by the deep satisfaction they found in their partnership. Nora's business continued to thrive, her reputation extending beyond Ash Fork to neighboring communities. Liam supported her work wholeheartedly, even building her a larger darkroom at the ranch so she could develop her more ambitious landscape photographs without having to travel to town. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Nora discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought both joy and anxiety, concerns about how motherhood would affect her work, fears about the physical challenges of pregnancy in the frontier territory. But Liam's steady support and Alina's practical wisdom helped ease her worries. Throughout her pregnancy, Nora continued her photography, albeit with some modifications to accommodate her changing body. Liam insisted on accompanying her on her more strenuous excursions, but he never suggested she should stop working altogether. Instead, he helped her adapt, carrying her heavier equipment and suggesting locations that would be accessible yet still yield the dramatic landscapes she sought to capture. Their son, William Henry Reeves, was born in November, a healthy, robust baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's fair coloring. Nora found motherhood both more challenging and more rewarding than she had anticipated. The exhaustion of caring for an infant while maintaining her business tested her endurance, but the profound love she felt for her child and the partnership she shared with Liam sustained her. As William grew from infancy to toddlerhood, Nora established a new rhythm to her work. Elena proved invaluable, caring for the boy when Nora needed to focus on her photography, while Liam often took his son with him on his rounds of the ranch, teaching him about the land and the livestock from his earliest days. By the time William was 3, Nora and Liam had completed their book, Arizona Territory, a photographic record which combined Nora's striking images with Liam's knowledgeable text. Published in San Francisco, it received favorable reviews and established Nora's reputation well beyond the local area. Their family grew again with the birth of their daughter, Elizabeth Elena Reeves, when William was 4. Liam doted on his little girl, while William appointed himself her solemn protector, a role he took very seriously. As the years passed, the Rocking R prospered under Liam's management, expanding its operations while maintaining his commitment to fair treatment of workers and sustainable practices. Nora's photography business evolved as well, focusing increasingly on documenting the changing West while training a young assistant to handle most of the portrait work in town. The Arizona Territory achieved statehood in 1912, a development Liam had long advocated for through his participation in territorial politics. By then, William was 13, Elizabeth 9, and they had added another son, James, to their family. The Reeves children grew up with an unusual upbringing for the time, encouraged to pursue both practical ranch skills and intellectual interests, regardless of gender. Elizabeth, to Elena's delight, showed an early interest in photography, often accompanying Nora on her excursions and demonstrating a natural eye for composition. William, thoughtful and deliberate like his father, gravitated toward the business aspects of the ranch, while young James combined his mother's artistic sensibility with his father's love of the land. Through it all, Nora and Liam maintained the partnership they had established from the beginning of their relationship, based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that deepened with each passing year. They weathered the challenges that came their way: drought years that threatened the ranch, economic downturns that affected Nora's business, the inevitable conflicts and concerns of raising 3 strong-willed children by facing them together, each contributing their particular strengths to the solutions. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Liam surprised Nora with a special gift, a new, state-of-the-art camera he had ordered from New York, along with a planned trip to Yellowstone National Park, where she had long wished to photograph the natural wonders. "I thought we might make it a family expedition," he explained as she examined the magnificent camera with evident delight. "The children are old enough now to appreciate it, and it would be good for them to see more of the country." "It's perfect," Nora said, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you for always supporting my work, all these years." "How could I not?" Liam replied, drawing her into his arms. "Your passion for capturing the beauty and truth of the world is one of the things I've always loved most about you." As they stood together on the porch of the home they had shared for 2 decades, looking out over the ranch that had flourished under their care and the family they had created together. Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the solitary, wary woman who had arrived in Ash Fork, determined to maintain her independence at all costs, to the wife, mother, and established photographer she had become, it was a transformation she could never have anticipated. "What are you thinking?" Liam asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was thinking about that day I first arrived in Ash Fork," Nora replied, leaning into his embrace. "How different everything might have been if you hadn't spoken up that day in the general store." "I like to think we would have found each other anyway," Liam said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Some things are meant to be." Nora smiled, not usually given to such romantic notions but unwilling to dismiss the possibility. "Perhaps you're right, but I'm glad it happened as it did." "As am I," Liam agreed. Every day. From inside the house came the sounds of their children, Elizabeth's laughter, William's deeper voice explaining something to his younger brother, James's enthusiastic response. The life they had built together surrounded them, rich with love and purpose. Nora turned in Liam's arms to face him, studying the familiar beloved features that had aged so gracefully over their years together. The lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of laughter and sunshine, the silver threading through his dark hair of experience and wisdom. To her, he was more handsome now than when they had first met. "I love you," she said simply, the words no less meaningful for having been said countless times before. "And I love you," Liam replied, his blue eyes warm with the depth of his feeling. "Always." As the sun set over the Arizona landscape they both loved, Nora and Liam Reeves stood together in the life they had created, a testament to the power of acceptance, respect, and love to transform two independent lives into something greater than either could have achieved alone.